turn it off? And we've got phone people in this building who probably know that thing backwards and forwards. I can't believe it. Fear the Lord. We're living in a time and in a culture where I think if we talk about fear of the Lord the way I'm going to talk about fear of the Lord, that we will not quite understand it. I don't think we understand at all what it means to really fear the Lord. We have a picture in our minds of some old grandfatherly type of guy, probably looks like me, or maybe even more older than me, who's benevolent and kind, and who if you come up to, if you're like one of my grandkids, you'll know that this is true. You'll come up and say, Grandpa, can I have such and such? God, can I have such and such? And of course, to our grandkids, we say, oh, of course. You know, and we load them up with two of it. You guys are brand new grandparents. You haven't got to, when your little one starts walking, I know you guys are going to be doing the same thing. Us that have been around grandparenting for a while, we all know that what I'm telling is the truth. It's just like, man, our heart melts when we see our little grandkids. And Stacy, you've got kids, not grandkids. It's not quite the same for you. Because it wasn't the same with my kids as it is with my grandkids. I suppose my kids, you wouldn't have wanted to grow up in my house and say, you need this or you want that. Because I was sort of determined you weren't getting it. You know, you got to earn it. You got to work for it. But not with my grandkids. Are you kidding? I don't want them working. I don't want them stressing out. I'm going to give it to them. I think that's the idea that we have, the concept we have, the image in our mind of who God is. And it's wrong. Samuel says, fear God. Step 2. Fear God. I told you I want to look in Hebrews, and so let's go to Hebrews right now. Hebrews 12. And you know where I'm going. Hebrews 12, verse 5. I'm going to pick it up at the if you're in an NIV, where the indentation is, where he's quoting out of Proverbs. And we're going to read through verse 8. And here's what it says. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I am talking about fearing God in the sense that we need to be somewhat afraid of God. Yes, it's true, God is loving. God is kind. God is benevolent. God is our Father. But I want you to see God as our Father in a different light than you normally see God as our grandfather. Because God's not our grandfather. God's our dad in this sense. Dad is going to discipline. And here's what he says, starting with the indentation. It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline. And do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines those he loves. And he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. I'm going to say as a son or a daughter, so that we don't leave anybody out before Mother's Day. Verse 7, endure hardship as discipline. Hardship now, folks. Endure hard times as discipline. God is treating you as sons, as children, as his own. For what son is not disciplined by his father? Verse 8. If you are not disciplined, parentheses, and everyone undergoes discipline, in parentheses, then you are illegitimate children and not true sons. We're going back to Samuel, but stay where you are. It's this clear. You need to fear God because God will bring discipline into your life. He's done it in mine in major, major, major ways where I've never been the same. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of the above. I spent a night, sometime I'll tell us and just kind of share it. Some of you guys know it, some of you don't. I spent a night out in the desert when I was 24 that changed my life physically and spiritually and emotionally and in every possible way to where I'll never, ever go back to the way I was. When I was 17, I came to Christ. And I lived a yo-yo life, and a lot of you will identify with this, where sometimes I was at a spiritual high, and sometimes I was at a spiritual low. And some of you, and Rick, you know me then, some of you know that at times I could look like I wasn't even saved, and yet sometimes some of you would say, well, man, Paul's going to be a preacher someday. And it was this dichotomy of up and down, chasing, and then when I was 24, something happened out in the desert one night, and they found me the next day. But I spent a night consciously alive consciously thinking about where I was, knowing I couldn't escape, thinking I was going to die, and knowing exactly why I was there. I never went out and said, oh, I did something stupid. That was beyond my kind of thinking. I knew for sure God was disciplining me right on the spot. I was never the same. I was in the hospital for 4 months, recovering. I was lucky to recover. God, according to the writer of Hebrews 12, disciplines those people he loves. Who does he love? His children. I'm going to say it the way verse 8 says it, but I'm going to say it so clear you'll never ever forget how that is. If you're not being disciplined, if you think you're getting away with living a kind of life you want to live, if you're sticking your nose in God's face and getting away with it, you think you're getting away with it, here's how clear it is. You, friends, are not one of God's children. That's a strong statement to make. Some of you want to quarrel with it, but I'm going to cut off the quarrel. I'm going to tell you to look at verse 8 and read it again. Read it right now while I'm talking. If God's not doing some kind of a processing in your life that's clearing out the clutter, that's not causing your mind to be completely, wholly devoted to Him, you're not one of His children. Because He cherishes, He loves, He chastens, He disciplines, He punishes His children. Now, you know what? When my kids were growing up, they played with the Smith kids. So we had the 3 Steen kids and we had the 3 Smith kids. And they were down at our house a lot because we had a pool and the Smith kids didn't have a pool. And Vicky's not here so I can tell the story. But you know what? When they would get in trouble, you know who got in trouble in my family? Out in my yard? It wasn't the Smith kids. Why? They weren't my children. You know who got in trouble? Dave, get in here. Jennifer, get in this house right now. Daniel, I never called him Daniel, always Danny. Daniel, get in here right this minute. And the Smith kids would find their way home. Paul was mad. But Paul wasn't mad at the Smith kids. Paul was going to administer some discipline to his own kids. Okay, take these thoughts. Take what the writer of Hebrews says. And now let's go back to Samuel. Have I been clear? I want to be so crystal clear that you'll never forget. When hard times come, when troubles come, when devastating things happen in your life, that you will know God is punishing His child because He loves you. That's what verse 6 says in Hebrews. Because He loves you. I want to add something before we go back to Samuel. When God calls someone into His service, now listen to me. Some of you are being called into service, some of you have been called into God's full-time service. When God prepares someone for service, He never, ever, ever sends them to the school of success. You know where He sends them? To the school of failure. The school of failure. That's what's ahead for you. If you said, "Oh God, my life is yours. God, this time I really mean it. I'm going to devote everything I have, all that I know of me. I'm going to devote it to you, God. I'm going to let you do whatever you want with it." Get ready, because trouble